Hello everyone, welcome to another part in this dungeon mechanics tutorial series. Today we're going to take a look at how to equip a sword onto your player and also play some animation on equipping and unequipping the sword. And also we're going to take a look at our idle animation and our run animation, and we're going to use a boolean to switch between different animations based on what state the player is in. If you like this type of content, you can support the channel by hitting the like button and also hit the subscribe button because we have more and more videos in this tutorial series coming out soon. Now let's get into the video. First, we need a melee weapon. So I'm going to go to the Fab store here, and I'm going to go ahead and search for melee and change this price to free. I just want to get a free asset really quickly, just to show you how things are done. I like this one-handed sword. Select this and add to project. And now I have the sword in the game. Go to your content drawer, go to your third-person character or first-person character, whichever one you're using. In our viewport, we're going to select our mesh and then add in a new scalable mesh, and this would be our sword. We need to attach it to a parent socket, which is going to be our hand in here. So if you need to know which socket, what's the name of the socket, you can simply go to the actual skeleton. Depending on which hand you want to use, right hand or left hand. In this case, we will use our right hand. Find your upper arm, and in your upper arm, you should have your hand. And right now, this hand bone is actually sitting on the wrist. So I want to use something like a middle metacarpal, or maybe the middle of one, just so that we can attach the sword and it looks like it's in the middle of our hand. Right click on this and I'm going to say copy selected bone name. Go back to my third person character, select the sword and the parent socket. I'm going to click on the search icon and then go ahead and paste that and then click here. And now I'm going to select the sword and go ahead and select our skeletal mesh. So it looks like that. So right now the sword is actually moving with the hand. So we want to have an animation where the player is now be able to clench their fist. So this is where we're going to use Mixamo. Mixamo actually has a sword idle, a standing idle animation, and we're going to use this. To bring Mixamo in, you just select download, and we're going to use 60 frames per second. Go ahead and download it. Once the download is complete, you're going to go to your content drawer, go to your main content drawer, and we already have created a Mixamo folder. I'm going to go ahead and drag that animation that I just downloaded in here. I'm going to leave everything to be default, and I'm going to say import all. So there's all of your imports. I went ahead and moved all the textures into the material folder, and now we have our standing idle animation with the sword. So now we need this to be placed on our character. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick retarget. So right click on this, and then we're going to click on retarget animation. And we're going to click on, we're going to go ahead and find our Mani, SKM Mani. And now we're going to select our standing idle and check how it looks like. It looks great. I'm going to go ahead and export. Inside of our third person, blueprint, animation, and I'm going to select the animation and the prefix. I'm going to put it as RTG underscore. So I know this is a retargeted asset. Export it out. Click on export. Now you got your Mani playing that animation. So we need to now go ahead and update our base anim blueprint to make that as our idle state. So the easiest way to get to your blueprint is just to go select your character mesh, and then there's your animation BP. So go ahead and select this search icon and they'll take you to the animation. And our character is the female Mani, so which is Quinn. And Quinn blueprint is actually a child of our Mani, so we can't edit the Quinn. We have to edit the Mani. So I'm going to go into the Mani and then go all the way to our anim graph where I have our locomotion. And inside of our idle, this is where we have our regular idle state. So I'm going to go ahead and make it so that when I'm in combat state, we have the weapon. And when I'm not in the combat state, I'm going to do the normal idle. So here I'm going to go ahead and do a variable. And the variable name is in combat with a question mark. And I'm going to drag this in and do a get. Now I'm going to go blend poses by bool. So this blend poses by bool has a true pose and false pose. When the combat is true, it's going to pull out this true pose. It's going to use the true pose animation. And when the combat is false, it's going to use a false pose. So first, let's connect our combat to the active node. When we are not in combat, we want to play our regular idle. So that will go into our false pose. And in our true pose, we need the actual animation. So back in our blueprints of our third person animation, and there's our retargeting idle anim. I'm going to go ahead and drag this into my true pose. and this will connect to my output. Compile and save. Now, standard combat is going to be set to false, and if I set this to true, Manny goes into combat state. And again, false, true. Now we want to be able to set up this true or false using our event graph. So go to your event graph here, and we also want to set this up using a interface function. So we're going to go ahead and open up our interface. In your content folder in the dungeon mechanics, you should have your BPI Dungeon Manager interface, and we're going to add a new function and say notify underscore combat state compile. And this is going to have just an input, and this would be is in combat question mark, and that will be the bool. Compile and save. And back in our animation blueprint, we're going to go ahead and implement that notify combat state, implement this event, and we're going to drag this combat state and plug it in here, and that will do a set. Now, in our first person character, we want to be able to press a button to go into combat state. Go ahead and call for left mouse button. So when I click on left mouse button, Manny is going to go into combat state. I'm going to drag our mesh in here, and off of this, I'm going to say get anim instance. And using this anim instance, I'm going to go ahead and say notify combat state and make this into true. Anytime I press the left mouse button, the character is going to go into a combat state. Now, what if I want to get out of the combat state? In this case, we're going to use a combo button. And what that does is basically when I click Alt or Control and the left mouse button, it's going to take us out of the combat state. So go to your content drawer, and where we have our inputs, which is usually inside of this third person folder, we're going to go ahead and create an action. The first action is going to be for input action IA underscore control, which is CTRL, and let's go ahead and save. And now we go back to our input folder, IMC default, click plus on this new mapping, and then go ahead and select our control. Open this up, and then we're going to go ahead and click control on our keyboard, and that will set this to left control. This is to notify the game when we press our left control. Now back in our inputs, actions, we're going to go ahead and create a new input action, and this would be IA underscore combat underscore off. And back in our IMC default mapping, we're going to go ahead and create a new mapping, and this would be for our combat off. Our main key is going to be our left mouse button, but also I'm going to open this up and add in a new trigger. And this trigger is going to be a coded action. This will allow me to press two buttons at the same time for me to actually trigger this. And open the index, and where the coded action says none, I'm going to go ahead and select control. This is why we previously set up our control as a left control. So this is going to take the left control button. Now, if I go ahead and press save and then go back to our third person, I can go ahead and say IA underscore combat off. I'm going to copy this entire anim instance and then go ahead and paste it here. And we want to set this to triggered. And now if I go ahead, compile, save, go into the game to test it, Manny spawns in with the sword, which is perfectly fine. We can take a look at that after. Now when I left click, Manny goes into the combat state. And if I press control and then left click, then you see Manny comes out of the actual combat state. This is good. Now one more thing I'm going to do is select the sword, and I'm going to go ahead and search for visible, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, compile. And now if I press play, the sword is no longer available in my hand. And here, where we click on the left mouse button, I'm going to drag the sword, and I'm going to set visibility to visibility and copy this and then paste it down here. And I'm going to make this non-visible. So how this looks in game is if I press play, if I click, I see the weapon coming out. And if I press control and click, the weapon is gone. And right now, Manny is running with the sword. It looks pretty good, but I actually want to change this running animation as well. In Mixamo, there is a sword running animation. I'm going to go ahead and download this in. Once it's downloaded, I'm going to go back into my Mixamo folder. I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this animation in here and just select import all. So there's your run with sword animation. We need to now make this animation play on our Manny. So we're going to right click and we're going to click on retarget animations. And here we're going to go ahead and select Manny, and I'm going to go ahead and click on export animations. Here, I'm going to go ahead and select blueprints, animation folder, and use a prefix of RTG underscore export and click on export. Now in here, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to create a blend space. The reason why I'm going to create a blend space is right now, if I go into my anim graph, locomotion, walk and run, you can see how Manny is walking and running in the ground based on the ground speed. Using a blend space that's walk and run. If I double click on this blend space, you can see it's a 1D blend space. It's not 2D. And if I hold down control, you can see that the Manny is idling to a walk animation to a run animation. So we're going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to right click and then click on animation. And here where we have legacy, I'm going to go ahead and select blend space 1D. And here we're going to select our skeleton as our Manny, SK mannequin. And this would be blend space underscore combat underscore walk run. Open this up. And here we're going to add in a horizontal axis for our speed. And our maximum speed value is going to be 500. And we're going to go ahead and look for RTG. So we have our animation. So there's our run with sword animation that we're going to put at the very end over here. Actually, we're going to make this grid divisions into 3. And the run with sword animation, we're going to put at the very end over here. And our standing idle would be over here. So you can see now if I press control, Manny is going to slowly start going from idle to the run. Now we're going to save this. And in our ABP Manny, where we have our locomotion walk state run, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a blend poses by bool. And we're going to drag our combat state and connect it to the active value here. And if the player is not in the combat state, which is our false pose, we're going to go ahead and do our regular movement. And if the player is in the combat state, we need to go to our animation folder and drag our combat walk run in here. The ground speed will be the same, so I'm going to plug it in here. And I'm going to drag this into our true pose and result. Compile and save. Now, if I go ahead and press play, I see Manny in the idle state. Now, if I press the left mouse button, Manny is going to go into a combat state. And now if I go ahead and do the movement, Manny is going to be running with the sword. Now, if I press control and click, Manny is going to go back into the original animations. Again, I can left click. Manny is now running with the sword, and then control and click. Manny is no longer running with the sword. And this is the simple tutorial on how you can add a sword to your player and also be able to make the player go into a combat state and come out of a combat state and also attach the weapon to your character. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at player attacking the enemy and do damage to the enemy as well. Hit the subscribe button if you want to be notified as soon as that gets released. Hit the like button if this video had helped you in any way. I'll catch you on the next one.